Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today we have a very, very, very special guest. We have none other than Kenny from Everseed. Ladies and gentlemen, we have an amazing game. Riot, Riot Games employees, seasoned team, amazing product being rolled out. I'm super excited to bring this to you. So, Kenny, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you, your past, and what you're currently working on.
Yeah, thanks for the for shilling me so hard, Nash. So I try to live up to those expectations. My name's Kenny, everyone. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Amihan, the studio behind Everseed. My background is I started in TradFi in Goldman Investment Banking, covering financial institutions like insurance companies or banks. This was right after the credit crisis. So, right out of college, I was painted as the vampire squid sucking Main Street dry. um, and that was a really transformative kind of part of my life where it really kind of shaped and colored my view of the finance industry in general. And I kind of migrated over to the gaming industry where I've been a virtual economist or monetization designer for 10 years. And a lot of the games in which I managed, analyzed, and designed include some of the most complex economies. So open market economies like West Asian MMOs at Nexon, MapleStory, for example, Western MMOs like EverQuest 1 and 2,
Nice.
H1Z1. And most recently, I was at Riot Games where I worked on League of Legends, and I was the revenue lead for League of Legends Wild Rift before leaving Riot to start this studio. So yeah, we first heard about Axie Infinity in March of last year when it was still relatively underground, pretty unknown project, and saw the kind of potential of what we could do to help uplift millions, if not billions, of people out of poverty through a game. But saw the red flags with respect to how their economy was designed, and knew with an experienced team that we could do better. And so that was the genesis of Everseed, and we've gone public this year, got really great organic traction with our community and our early holders, and we've shipped a couple of public game demos. They've been doing really well in terms of the feedback that we've gotten, and we're looking to go open beta middle of next year. So happy to be here.
Awesome. So you said you are a quote game design economist. Is that correct?
Virtual economist or monetization designer. Yeah.
Okay, virtual. Can you explain to the people what exactly that is and kind of what you do from day to day? Because even myself, I've been playing games my whole life. I've looked into a lot of like game development stuff, talked to people, even on the podcast, and like I have no idea what that is. So I would love to hear more about what you actually do and the struggles and things.
Yeah. So I think it's important to understand that, if you look at Web 2 games, about 95 to maybe even like upwards of 99% of these games, they're very simple. They have very simple economies. Like think about a game like Candy Crush, and it's just like King that's monetizing an individual player in a silo. That's you. And then if your friend is playing, they're monetizing that person. And if someone else, they're monetizing that person. And there's no kind of like trade or any types of like interlinking connections between the players themselves. It's mostly just like a one to many model. So if you think about like a hub and many spokes, um, that is not really a very I mean, that's a very simple economy to basically design and manage. It's still complex, but it's relatively simple compared to an open market economy, which there's a lot of not just a one point to many, but many to many potential transactions that happen on a peer-to-peer level. And so my experience is with the latter, with more complex economies, and a lot of the kind of things that I would do in early days, for example, while working at Nexon, was looking at the in-game currency at the time was like called misos. I don't know if you remember this or if people remember this, but it's like the equivalent of in-game gold.
Mm,
And I would measure like the inflation, rates of like of misos, over the history of the game,
yeah.
and looking at like what are the balances of different players, in terms of hardcore players versus casual players, and how to basically mitigate, the gap in uh, inequality in misos between these players. And then there were different kind of like items or microtransactions that you could do in MMOs like MapleStory that allowed you to um, have certain types of advantages inside the game and some of these items could be tradable. And so to think about like how can we actually build a model that um, is able to keep a lot of the uh, that still allows for trade to happen, but still make it so that our business can still make money and that the economy doesn't break and things like this. So
Yeah. So I want to speak on a hot topic actually because you mentioned that, and we're gonna get into the specifics of Everseed just in a bit, guys. But I want to know more about this because I'm really interested. We have an industry expert here, and game economies and Web3 are so important. So, one thing I do want to ask you is we've seen the past models maybe not working out, but one thing in Web3 that's been kind of consistent is royalties. There's been a lot of talk right now of Magic Eden, the biggest NFT Solana marketplace, just said that royalties are now optional. Pretty much every project has had royalties. DGods just announced they're going to 0% royalties. So, do you think royalties should be enforceable? And do you think they're an important part of a Web3 ecosystem?
I think that I think for games like ourselves, for our games that are more quote unquote um, Web 2.5 as opposed to a fully on-chain game, like I would characterize a fully on-chain game as like a Web 3 game, as like the most Web 3 maxi game.
Yeah.
You know, those games, because they're going to be fully decentralized in their architecture, it's a lot harder for you to enforce things. But for like a game that has most of its kind of gameplay be in a Unity or Unreal Engine, for example, you know, we even if let's say Magic Eden or Solana or other types of protocols don't enforce royalties, we could have the option. I'm not saying we would, but we could have the option to enforce it ourselves in the game logic, where like let's say you don't pay royalties on an NFT, then the use case of that NFT inside the game in terms of what it unlocks for you could be, you know, stopped. Again, this is not something that saying we would do, um, but just a possibility.
Yeah.
But I think royalties are definitely something that. So you know, to take a step back on a step back here, like one kind of comment that I'll have to L1 developers, because really this is effectively something that has to be addressed on a very fundamental level in the architecture of a blockchain, is like that the key takeaway or message I want to give to them is like stand for something. Like what I mean by this is like Ethereum was early and they saw what Bitcoin did, and what they wanted to do beside that was differentiated themselves from Bitcoin was to provide um, programmability of smart contracts that Bitcoin couldn't do at the time in a massive scalable way. Um, and Solana basically saw Ethereum and wanted to, you know, do a similar playbook of, you know, providing smart contracts, but ideally in a way that has way less transaction fees. But in a lot of ways, they just like, you know, a lot of the other kind of decisions they made was just like kind of like, you know, based off that model. Now, going forward, like there's a whole bunch of new L1s that are coming up, and it's my personal, you know, like thinking or kind of like philosophy that each blockchain is going to be good for different things. Like Ethereum having high gas fees, it actually is okay, or if not beneficial for like projects that are, for example, art oriented.
Yeah.
Solana having low transaction fees, in theory, it should be good for, you know, games, because it has like, you know, games generally tend to be lower priced assets at higher velocity. Um, and but they haven't really done a great job of attracting the consumers, the gamers, to their platform. Like they've, if you look at the kind of percentage of volume that is being transacted of Solana NFTs in gaming, it's actually quite low. So you know, I think for other future incumbents like maybe Sui or like Aptos or whatever, you know, if they're very serious about attracting a specific type of demographic like developers or gamers, they should build a chain that's for that. If you don't
Yeah.
build a chain that supports that, you're just going to attract nobody, and your token is going to basically, you know, not going to NGMI, right? And so,
Are we talking like ETH gaming or are we talking, Ronin, IMX, those type things?
well, I think the issue though is that I don't think smart contracts are enforceable in the ETH ecosystem on L1 protocol level, and neither is it on the Solana protocol level. And there's
Yeah.
no way that the ETH Foundation is going to make a change that basically changes that because they're already found success and they're decentralized. Solana, you still have Anatoly and the Solana Foundation basically running the show, even though they try to say like, "Oh no, we're not running the show," but they turn the chain on and off.
Oh yeah.
But the only reason why they're publicly saying it is because they don't want to get scrutinized by the SEC.
Yeah.
But like, stand for something. Like, do make a decision that actually attracts the kind of like demographic you're going for, right? And this is a feedback not to basically any L1 dev.
Nice. Yeah, I respect that. Like, take a stand, and you might lose some supporters, you might gain some supporters, but at the end of the day, like, the people need to know what they're getting themselves into before they commit to a chain. Especially
Yeah,
the developers are spending, their life's work literally on the blockchain. So
yeah.
I do agree with that. And are you guys doing anything that's maybe special for Everseed, where you can monetize or do anything type of that you can share with us at this time, or not really?
Uh, yes, we are. We do have alternate kind of strategies for generating revenue that is outside, that is not requisite or kind of necessary for the fee-based model of royalties from NFTs. But I don't want to share that publicly.
Yeah.
So sorry, it's an internal thing.
No, I that was like a long shot. I knew you weren't gonna share it, but I thought I would just toss it out, just kind of shot in the dark there. But
Yeah, but I think a good takeaway is that like my whole career has been around creative ways to find people to pay for digital items,
yep.
at different companies, and so yeah, there's a whole bunch of different tools that I've kind of used in the past that can be applied here.
Is there a game in Web3 and or Web2 that you think does monetization very well? Because recently my girlfriend and I downloaded a game called Cookie Run, right? I don't know if you've heard of that game. Have you heard of that?
I have not heard of that game,
Okay.
but
Anyway.
I will look it up right
All
now.
right.
Yeah,
Anyway, so we downloaded Cookie Run, right? And
yeah,
it's kind of like Clash of Clans. It has a base builder. You do all that stuff, and then it has your auto battler on the side. You can use your abilities, but it's pretty much an auto battler. And these MFs just toss, not ads, but they toss like $2 for this, $1 for this. You can get
yeah.
another builder if it's not. It's $20 for another builder, and we only have three, so we're like maxed out on progress. Like, there's so many different ways they try to monetize, and I'm the type of guy where it's like, I played League for 10 years, and I probably
Yeah.
spent like $300 on skins. Like, I spent nothing. I, I'm not the type of person to spend for a video game unless it's to actually purchase the game. I don't care about cosmetics or any of that. So, like, is there any game you think has done it really well, or as a model that you think, wow, like, this is smart, or this is doing something new and unique and good?
So define what good looks like in your opinion. Like
Okay.
because the reason why I ask is because you have like for example Game of War that was made by Gabe Leydon who now leads Machine Zone who now sorry leads Limit Breaker Digidaigaku
Mm.
who basically made a killing monetizing the living s out of like a small player base, but the average revenue per that user is really high, but it's a niche game versus League of Legends, which has generated way more money over a longer time frame, but they obviously have way more scale. So, like, how do you define good in this case?
When I say a good monetization strategy, I think of something that's not intrusive on the player, where they're not going to be like, "Wow, really? You're asking me for money for this?" That's one thing, and then a way where it flows with the actual like core gameplay loop, or it's someone's getting value from it. So, like, for example, you don't need a skin in League of Legends, but you can get it. But if I'm playing Clash of Clans and I need another builder, I won't mind spending $5 for that first builder, just because I really need it for like my progress in the game. So really, just any game you think incorporated it in a fluid way into the game.
Mm, yeah, I think I think the easy answer that a lot of people would say is like a Riot game like League of Legends or Valorant. But the problem with that type of the trap that a lot of people fall into is like they think that that business model is actually ROI positive uh, or profitable at lower kind of scale. So like the reason why League of Legends that business model works for League of like skin cosmetics only is because that game is massive. Like hundreds of millions of players like every around the world, right?
Yeah.
And if it didn't have that massive player base, then the game would probably then that monetization would probably fail. So I think on a revenue generation per player perspective, um, and also keeping in mind the actual gameplay quality and whether or not it's something that you feel like you're actually getting joy out of playing. I think Supercell games do obviously a really they're best in class at that. Now, a Supercell like game doesn't necessarily um, speak to certain gamers, like especially those that don't like the kind of like pay to win model. But I think you'd be hard pressed to argue that they've done a bad job. Now, I think one of the things that's interesting is that when you go on the tactical level, like if you look at like battle passes, just to take an example, battle passes when implemented in different Supercell games like Clash of Clans versus Clash Royale, like battle passes actually have found more success the in clans versus royale because of the unique way in which um, the gameplay is differentiated. And so it's just I think a kind of key takeaway that I'll impart on you and your listeners is that you can't just copy pasta what worked well in another game for your game.
Yeah.
You can try, but the chance of success is probably low. You really have to think deeply about what is it that the game core game design is like, and how do you build an economy or monetization strategy around that.
Yeah, you know what? That makes a lot of sense because video games are so different. You
Yeah,
have Candy Crush versus Call of Duty, right? Those are two completely different games and they have different monetization strategies. Like
yeah.
my mom's on level like 2000 of Candy Crush, right? I don't know if she spent any
My
money
mom
on it.
too.
Yeah, a lot of our moms are on a high level, right? I don't know if she spent money on
Yeah,
it, but I know a lot of moms that have.
yeah.
So yeah, you're right. It's just kind of a case by case basis. And one crazy thing actually about video games is something called power creep, and I want to talk about
Hmm.
that. So for anyone
Yeah.
in the audience that doesn't know, power creep means when a game comes out, you have basically like your gear is level 1 through 10, right? Level 10 you have the best stuff, you got the best helmet, the best armor, all that, best sword, whatever, gun, whatever. Now, when they update the game, they need people to buy like the DLC or play it and monetize off that somehow. So what they do is they'll oftentimes make a power level 11, right? So you have the newest stuff is the best. And you do this without even thinking of it, right? League of Legends, the new champions always OP, right? Um, Stuff like that. Lots of games. So the newest stuff usually is the most overpowered thing, which encourages people to buy it. So when it comes to Web3, it might be a little harder to do that because there's money involved. I just bought my NFT for blah, 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 however much, or I just earned this NFT that's super hard to get. There's only 10 of them, but there's only 10 of them and it's super rare. And now it's worse than the thing that just came out like 5 minutes ago that there's like 5,000 of. So is this something that you think is going to be a problem? Like, how can we potentially solve this problem?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think uh um I think what you're basically talking about is kind of balance at the end of the day, like game balance and also if it's monetized, like economy balance. And there's different schools of thought. Like I think that there was like a famous meme from the before Web3 that existed that talked about like the different ways in which Riot versus Blizzard versus maybe Valve balance their gameplay. Like I think there was like a web comic, and it was like each two players for each kind of like square, and they each had a sword, and it said like I forget which one was which, but like one way was you make everybody's sword bigger, which is power creep. Another way is like you make everybody's sword smaller, which is like the opposite. And another way is like you swap out like swords for like something else, like an axe or something like that.
Oh,
And well, I don't know if that was in the comic, but our strategy is the last one, is like instead of actually thinking about making stats that are strictly better or strictly worse, we're thinking about how can we find what is effectively like a side grade, like something that is like, provides you an advantage in a certain situation, but actually a disadvantage in another. And the use case for that item, it might be better in certain situations, but worse in others. Like I think League
Ah,
of Legends did a really great job with this, where it's like, you could play as Darius or Garen. They're very similar, maybe, but depending on the matchup, you could one might be better versus another. And so, and that is really matchup dependent, and I think allows for much more interesting balance opportunities.
awesome. Yeah, that makes sense. So instead of having an item that's good at everything, maybe have a speed item, a heavy item, and an average like sword or something. That's
Yeah,
the kind of roundabout item. So that's a good point actually, where
yeah,
you can add kind of different stats, change things a bit, and then it can fit anyone's gameplay. Um,
yeah.
so we've spent about 20 minutes talking about economies. I want to go over a few more things, and then we're going to dive into the actual game of Everseed and what you guys are doing. So it'll probably be around the 30-minute mark, guys. I'll have timestamps for you. And the next thing I want to talk about is play to earn, which is a really hot topic. So a lot of people got, I'll say, burned by previous games where they bought the in-game assets and for 300 $400, and oftentimes you need multiple just to play the game, so it's like $1,200, and then now they're
I
worth,
remember 3 axes to play. Yeah,
yeah, and now they're worth like $4, right? So
yeah.
I think it's because play to earn we found in certain models is unsustainable. We have not found a sustainable model yet. Do you think that video games should have a token that you're constantly earning and that's tied to the economy?
Um, I think that so I'll share with you kind of like what the problem is. The problem is not necessarily issuing a token. Um, the problem is issuing a token haphazardly or rushing into it without actually having a good understanding of how that token can be synced. So I think the problem with Web3 is that everybody wants to be early or first because Web3 rewards that, right? Look at Azuki, one of the first like, quality anime projects. And and every single anime project after that is just like, oh, it's an Azuki derivative, right?
Yep.
And it kind of like, and that sucks because, Azuki shouldn't have the benefit of being like the only anime or manga like, project, but people associate with that, right? Now, uh and so similarly, like a lot of people, they'll basically rush to issue a token because the community is demanding it. They're like staking when, or whatever,
Yeah.
and they'll do it, and then they're trying to basically fix a plane engine after the airplane has already taken off, which is way more difficult than if it's still in the hangar. So yeah, so I think ultimately what game developers should do, or NFT projects should do, is they should try and experiment with an off-chain currency that's just like made up, and see if it's actually balanced first before they dive in head
Facts.
first into an on-chain. Yeah,
Yeah, that's a very good idea. And then I'll be starting my own project soon. I'm working with the indie game studio. I haven't really told many people, so if you made it this
congrats,
far,
sir.
like here's some alpha. But I'm gonna do that, right? So I don't even know if I'm ever gonna launch a token, just because I've been burned so many times. I've watched so many games go up in flames. So I really like your idea of like, let's launch our game. Let's get some data. Let's see how this token is performing. Let's see what people are doing with this token. Let's see all this stuff. And then maybe when we're ready, or if we decide so, let's go on chain. When we think that there's some type of benefit, maybe the ownership aspect, or maybe it can unlock some feature that wouldn't already be in the game, for example. So that's a really interesting point. Now, do you think the consumer and or the user behavior will actually change from an off-chain token to an on-chain token? Because once there's real value tied to this token, um, or for purposes of the SEC, a real in-game utility, then I think people's mindset kind of changes. What do you have to say about that?
um yeah, I think that's true. And I think one of the nice things about issuing an off-chain token first as opposed to an on-chain token is that if people are there for an off-chain token, it's more likely that they're there for intrinsic motivation as opposed to extrinsic motivation. And so you could get a better sense of like true product market fit as opposed to an on-chain token, which just basically attracts, speculators as well.
That's a very good point. So if you're playing the video game, even if it's a Web 2.5 game, right, it only has NFTs, or maybe your NFT is just an access to the game and there's not even an NFT in the game, right? So if you're playing the game for fun, you're once the token comes out, you're still gonna play for fun, right? So that's a very good point of like you might have your core fan base and they're there for the right reasons. They won't leave when a token value goes down. That is a very good point. Um, will Everseed have its own token, and is it already out?
It's not already out, and we'll most likely launch at least one token, but we'll only launch it after the game is live in open beta.
Awesome, amazing, and very good opportunity. Like no project's done that yet, and I think you can tell like you're very seasoned in the area or in the space, and like, hey guys, we shouldn't rush into this. It could be catastrophic, and
Yeah.
completely bite your gamers in the butt. So, can you tell me a little bit about the actual game of Everseed now? I want to get into the game. It's something that has, like you said, got a lot of organic traction, which is fairly rare for NFT games. There's not many games killing it on Twitter, but there's a lot of seasoned employees. Like I see ex Riot employees like you. I see Activision employees, stuff like that. But the projects aren't really getting much hype right now. Can you explain to me a little bit about what your game is, what can players expect to do in it, and kind of how it'll work?
Yeah. So I think thanks for sharing that. It is actually a very organic community. We've done, for the purposes of clarifying this, we've done $0 in paid advertising to date, and we've also done very little, if none at all, like comment retweet for whitelist or allow list or anything like that. So our metrics are about as organic as you can get, and um, uh, so sorry, what was the original question?
Yeah. So
You might
tell
have
me
edited
a
this out.
tell me a little bit about what actually is the game. What can I do in it? What's the
Oh
genre?
yes,
And yeah,
yes, yes. Sorry, went off on a tangent. So the game at its core is effectively a roguelike strategy game. And so so roguelike is the inspiration for that really came from wanting to make the game free to play, but also give the ability to play and earn. So free to play and earn. And we wanted to have enough randomness in the core gameplay where it can't be simple to just write a script or bot that repeatedly farms a game. Like one of the main problems with Axie that we saw was just hundreds of tablets strewn against the wall, just like farming SLP, because that game is very simple.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, we wanted to you know add that formula to a kind of like easily accessible gameplay that is turn based, that people of all different types of gaming backgrounds could be able to play and earn. And so that's why we settled on tower defense or strategy at the core. And then surrounding the game is this meta world that's persistent, that is basically like a social farming kind of um, meta game that is inspired by Stardew Valley, Animal Crossing, Sunflower Land, or
nice,
things like that. And so the idea is that we would have the outer economy and the inner core loop be combined with the same type of interlinked with the same economy, where whatever you grow in the farming metagame can be brought in and harvested as a resource in the tower defense game, because all our towers are plants. So that's how we basically can guarantee, an economy with enough robust sinks and faucets on day one.
awesome. And will your future token, right, on or off chain, whichever, will it be used in all different facets of the game, or will you have like one for the tower defense, one for the let's say a Stardew Valley more type base builder thing, or
I think for anything that is play and earn related, like a utility token, that will be the same token. So yeah.
nice?
Um, I won't share the details yet of what our second token will be for, though. So
Okay, got it. So one thing I want to ask you, right, is roguelites have a special place in my heart. I really love The Binding of Isaac and Enter the
nice.
Gungeon.
Nice.
And for those of you that don't know in the audience what a roguelite is, it's one of those games where like you go, you clear some levels, and you basically keep playing until you die. And there's like randomized items. It's a new experience every time, and it's very, very fun, right? And I love games like that. Can you explain how tower defense ties into this roguelite genre? Because I've never really heard of that.
Yeah, have you played Slay the Spire?
I have not, but I've been wanting to very
Okay.
badly.
Yeah, so Slay the Spire. So I would say our game is kind of like a mix between Slay the Spire and Hades. In that sense, like we're not an ARPG, we're not a card game, we're a tower defense game. But I think like, if you've played both of those games, or you could replace Hades with Binding of Isaac. You can gotta get a good idea of what we're building. So, um, yeah, this at the core of roguelike games, there's really several different kind of key components. The first is randomization in the core gameplay. So
Mm-hmm.
in Binding of Isaac, the maps are generated differently, the upgrades that you're given are randomized, etc. And so when you're playing our game, no two maps are going to be the same because we're using algorithms to generate procedural content. Uh, so um, so that's number one. And number two is, when you're in Binding of Isaac, you're going from like one map or one dungeon to another after you clear, or in Hades it's similar. And in between these moments, there's like, different upgrades you could go or speak with like NPCs that provide you different opportunities to,
It's like a
you know,
shop.
exactly. Yeah, and so we don't really have that in our game demo in a very meaningful way right now because it's still early, but we're going to be building kind of like that type of decision trees with different upgrade paths as we kind of go closer and closer to open beta.
Awesome. Yeah, I am extremely. When can we expect the open beta?
Middle of next year.
Okay. Yeah, I am super excited. I like I said, I tower defense is my favorite genre. I love tower defense, balloons, um, all those games. So having that mix with the roguelite, I am super excited to see how exactly that's going to work. Now, what is the ultimate goal in the game? Is it to play the roguelite in tower defense, and then I get your currency, and then I can build and customize my base, kind of like how you mentioned Stardew Valley? Is that how it's going to flow?
Yeah, so the idea here is you bring in uh seeds or plants into a run to kind of like as like resources, or you can think of it as like a backpack, right? And then you go into the run and you try to use those resources, and you also get to earn more resources during the run. And you make choices of like, just like in a regular roguelike, do I want to get rid of this card or get rid of this upgrade and get something else or something like that? And at the end of the run, depending upon how well you do, how long you last, you're given rewards. So imagine you're getting like more seeds, and then you're able to take those rewards or seeds and then plant them in the farming metagame to be able to create more resources, maybe like stronger buffs, stronger plants, or companions that you can bring into the core loop again. So that's how it works.
Awesome, awesome. And then for those of you guys that are listening that only kind of care about like play to earn and stuff like that, there, I want to say that Stardew Valley is it was made by one single person, if I'm not mistaken, like one dev. He did everything, music, sprites, all that. And that game is played by millions and millions of people on multiple ways. It is an amazing game. So those of you that think like, oh, cool, you're gonna get to upgrade your base, like so, guys, there are millions of gamers who love Stardew Valley and this kind of customization and all this stuff. Like my girlfriend loves the game. Even I found myself playing like customization games and stuff like that. So very, very excited for that. Now,
Yeah. By the way, we won't just have customization. There are other things that we'll have too, but yeah, but for sure, yeah. And also we're not a single dev team. We have a
yeah,
whole
yeah,
team
yeah.
of veterans behind us. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. But yeah, guys, there's a lot of potential. Now, can you explain to me what NFTs you've already launched and how do they kind of mingle with the ecosystem in the game?
Yeah. So right now we have two collections, both of which are live on Magic Eden. So we originally shipped on Solana, and this was before the kind of issues that Solana had with congestion and the network turning on and off. So um, uh, I would just say that going forward, we'll likely explore other chains as options.
Hmm.
So we'll likely be a multi-chain solution. paying close attention to events as they evolve with the NFT royalty situation. And so right now, uh, the Rangers were the original kind of NFTs that were minted at 1 SOL each, and the Sprouts collection, Everseed Sprouts, was an airdrop that was gamified with some different progression mechanics for that. And right now, the primary benefit to holding is to be able to access our playtests with Rangers. Holding the Rangers also grants you an off-chain staking currency called Favor, which we'll be using to give you, I guess, our community members different rewards by allowing them to kind of spend that favor in the future. And given the current drama with NFT royalties, our earlier NFTs were um, shipped with with smart contract code that it does not have mandatory enforcement of royalties. And so, one thing that you'll probably expect is that whenever this kind of drama or fog gets lifted, we'll be probably doing something creative with the transformation or evolution of, taking our existing NFTs and bringing them to kind of like the new framework or smart contract paradigm for the kind of new era, whether that's going to be within Solana or elsewhere. So, yeah,
Nice, yeah, because it is a big deal, right?
yeah.
You guys are a seasoned team. You're working very hard. You can definitely go somewhere else and get paid for your hard work. So the fact that people want to not pay royalties to the projects they hold and they're trying to buy and sell, like I think it's kind of messed up, honestly. I'm a big supporter of royalties. I mean, that's why we're in Web3, right? We're trying to kind of be more community focused, right? Let's reward the people who are actually building the communities for us. And I
Mhm.
want to take that stance real quick. Now, have you, with the recent kind of flood of people and attention, have you ever looked into Cardano? Or is there maybe another chain that you're looking at right now aside from Solana?
Um, have not looked at Cardano yet, although open to it for sure. So far, we've been before this kind of royalty drama. We were looking at EVM solutions
Ooh,
because
yeah.
of the interoperability aspect of things. But
It's like
ETH,
Matic.
uh, yeah, yeah. So like ETH L1 plus L2, but right now the smart contract problem, the royalty problem, is also existing in the ETH ecosystem as well. So I think if we wait probably like a month or two and see which chains are actually going to, take our advice and like stand for something, then we'll have a better idea of like which chain we'll be building on. But for now, like we don't really need to make any decisions off that because we it just pays to wait.
Yeah, that's fair, right? Let's not make any rash decisions. Let's see how this kind of plays out. And then you guys will say, all right, let's do the thing that's best for our project. That's a really good
Yeah.
bet. Now, because you guys haven't really committed to Solana fully yet, and eventually you may have to commit to a chain or chains. Can I get your opinion on kind of more centralized chains, like let's say Ronin versus a more decentralized Ethereum, ADA, I would say, and probably not Solana?
Yeah. So the way I view it is, excuse me, um, different. I think one thing that's become very clear to me, and it wasn't clear before, was that each blockchain or each ecosystem has its own unique culture.
Yep.
Like, think about a Bitcoin maxi versus an ETH maxi versus a Solana maxi. Like, you're thinking of like, I mean, if you're familiar with those ecosystems, like who you're picturing in your mind is like very different in terms of like what they
Yeah.
value, like their philosophy of life, and like so many things, right? And I think that you know I think that is really the more important thing to think about with respect to, versus the centralization versus decentralization debate. Because it, when you're building a game, you have to like really understand who you're building for. If you're building for the whales and you just want the like you just care about like the people with the most crypto money to be your early adopters, then you're gonna do what Gabe Layden done with Digidaigaku and just like just like do that, right? Run that playbook with ETH-L1.
Yeah.
Um, but you're not really going to attract the masses, I think, because the masses are not going to pay like tens of dollars or hundreds of dollars in gas fees for every single kind of transaction. It's just like not realistic. So, but if you're building for kind of like but yeah, I mean, like if you think about Gabe's history, he's never really cared. He never really found success building a game for the masses. He found success building a niche game with Game of War and like monetize the crap out of that base, and that worked fine. That generated a lot of money. But I think the way that we're thinking about our product and our game and who we're building for, it's basically different. It's like the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and thanks for like kind of taking that stance a little bit. Now, I do want to talk about, let's say, in 5 years, 10 years down the line, everything goes perfectly for Everseed. What does it look like for you guys? What does it look like for the game, the community, everything?
Yeah, great question. So, we uh so right now our goal is to build a 1,000-hour game um, that is super replayable and fun on its own merits and ship that as our MVP in the middle of next year. And that is our primary focus for the short term. But the ideal long term is to eventually help solve a lot of the problems with Web3 ourselves. So what I mean by this is, for our MVP, we're not going to solve like the inherent friction or terrible kind of like points of like Web3 onboarding from a UX UI perspective. But our strategy is to try and push that down um, the acquisition funnel, like so that people are just like spending tens of hours in the game having fun first before you ask them to like install a wallet or like KYC or anything like that, right? And I think like if they're already emotionally and invested in your game from that experience, then they're more willing to kind of like go through that friction. But ultimately, like that's just like a temporary band-aid thing. It's not a long-term thing. We want to solve that friction ourselves. And so we see ourselves also kind of running the potential Sky Mavis playbook of like, making our own wallet solution and other things like this. But in terms of sequencing, we think the game becomes first and foremost most important.
Awesome. Yeah. Have you ever thought of, rather than making your own, just maybe joining the Ronin blockchain or like Immutable X or something, or is that not really on your radar?
Um, so um, uh, building our own. So okay, so here's I guess some interesting thing to think about. Building your own wallet or marketplace, does it take time? Yes, but is it does it take, compared to a game, how difficult it is? And it's about like an order of magnitude less difficult. Like, not to say that what the MetaMask or Phantom or the Magic Eden OpenSea folks did was bad. Like, they hustled and they did great, but at the end of the day, um, if you look at the total on-chain daily users for Axie in July of this year compared to OpenSea or Magic Eden, Axie dwarfed them both. And Axie's not a hit game. Like, Axie's like, if it was a Web 2 game, you'd be like, who the F cares, right? In terms of the actual player count.
Yeah.
So our thinking here is like, why do we want to help out a competitor that we see ourselves like basically just dominating when our game goes live in
Damn.
the future?
Yeah. I mean, that's actually a very good point, right? It's, if you guys are going to be bigger than them, why work with them, right? Or I guess why join them when you can just have your own thing? And if you have your own marketplace, I mean, let's be real, right? Unless it's Steam that has its own general marketplace, pretty much every game has an off-chain marketplace when you think about it, right? Like League of Legends has, IP, RP, or I guess Blue Essence and Orange Essence. I'm an OG. But Valorant has its own credits, all that. Like they have the skin marketplace, everything. CS:GO, every game has its own marketplace, no matter how big and small, even Clash of Clans, that stuff. So, yeah, I mean, if that makes a lot of sense. That really does make a lot of sense.
Like
And
actually, so I'd actually want to double click on this a bit more because I think a lot of people don't understand the nature of how Web3 works. Like, marketplaces in Web 2 like eBay or Etsy or whatever, they succeeded largely because all the data for their users is in a centralized database that they control and own, right? And in Web 3, that's basically inverted. The user data is basically in the user's hands, right? Like the wallet and the transaction data that's all public on a blockchain. And you can see how like Looks Rare did a vampire attack and airdrop tokens to OpenSea whales to basically take their market share. The reason why Magic Eden flipped this optional royalty switch at the last minute is because they saw their market share
Yeah.
decline from 90% to 50% overnight. And then when they flipped the royalty switch on, it went back up to 80%, right? When you think about that dynamic, again, this is the reason I know this is because the data is public, right?
Yeah.
Anybody can pull the data. And the reason why this happens is because there's less competitive moats for these basically commodity like services, right? A marketplace is a commodity, a wallet is a commodity. That the kind of fees for the commodity business is going to zero in Web3 in the long run. I was just shocked at how the long run just became now like very quickly, but Web3 I guess moves even faster than we like to think. So yeah.
Oh yeah, it does. And that was a very, very informative take. Thank you for that. And I want to talk about right now the kind of current state of myself as a gamer and how a lot of people might relate to me and why they might be interested in Everseed. So I'm a part of Gen Z, right? Our attention span is the same as a peanut.
Goldfish.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
goldfish. There you go. So for us, like I notice myself sometimes scrolling on TikTok or Twitter, and if something doesn't catch my attention in the first 2 to 3 seconds, like I've already scrolled, and there's people way, way, way worse than me, right? So, do you notice that Everseed may kind of cater to quick and fast gameplay in the roguelite, or is it something that people are gonna have to commit like to a full game of League of Legends, which could take up to like 50 minutes?
So no, we definitely wanted to so we wanted a model that was flexible for both, where like I think one of the benefits of a rogue, like if you remember Binding of Isaac, is like you could play a map, it's like maybe a couple minutes in length, and then once you clear the map, it's kind of like a breath where you could, run to the bathroom or whatever, grab a drink of water. And so you can think of a similar uh, kind of like aspect of engagement with our game where like the core maps or puzzles like each map or kind of like a distinct part of the game is maybe like 5 minutes in length, but then it's when you chain these kind of like maps together in a run like structure, maybe the total run is about like between half an hour to an hour in length. And so the idea is to provide you moments where you can go deep, but also if duty calls and you need to take a breather, you could just like put it on pause.
Yeah, of course. That is very cool. Now, I want to talk about PC versus mobile gaming. Will you guys be exclusively PC, mobile, or both, or how's that going to work?
Cross-platform web and mobile. So on desktop will be accessed through a link. So no download, no install.
Okay, so that's like a browser game, right? If I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken.
Mhm.
Okay, so how important is it to make a Web3 game that can be playable on both PC and mobile?
It depends on who you're building for. Like I said, if you're targeting like ETH whales, which are probably all like engaging with Web3 on their desktop, less important for you to build on mobile. But if you're trying to, cater to a wider audience, then I think like you need to be available on mobile.
Got it. And for Everseed's gameplay, is it going to be something that I could play with a $50 Android, or are you going to have intense graphics, AAA quality stuff like that?
The former.
Sorry, I think it cut out. What was that?
The former.
Okay,
Yeah. So we really cared about accessibility and providing a game that anybody with any type of device could be able to access.
awesome, got it. And now, recently, Apple announced that they will be allowing, I think, the sale of NFTs. I'm not sure if it's the transfer, but eventually they'll probably let NFTs on their platform, right?
Mhm.
Um, do you think that, and they're going to take a 30% cut? Do you think that's fair for projects like Everseed, where we'll be able to be on the App Store, but they're gonna take a 30% cut, even if we are like people are selling or trading NFTs?
Yeah, I think it's unclear exactly how they're planning on regulating that. I think it's easier for them to enforce that tax if we're talking about primary sales, like if you have to pay money to mint.
Yeah,
But our whole economy is designed around, um, when the game is live, to not have any type of requirement for players to spend money to mint NFTs. Like we're planning to, even before Gabe started shilling free to own, we've been building with that in mind with our gaming economy for a year plus. So
awesome. Love to hear that. Now, Kenny, are there any games in Web3 that you think are maybe doing a good job, or you think that you're looking into and maybe that you like to play
uh
besides Everseed?
um in terms of gameplay, because like there's a lot of hype around projects that that there's not even like a freaking game demo or teaser out.
Yeah.
I'm I'm excited about Wildcard Alliance, just looking at the kind of like quality of the game they've built. And I think that was most recently led by Paradigm for their most recent round. But I think that game is not going to come out for a very long time.
Yeah, that's where we
So
are right now.
yeah. um, and uh, yeah, I think I'm interested to see what Azra comes out with. But also that's not going to come out for a very long time. um, and their art isn't really that appealing to me either. As a end consumer. So yeah, I think those two. I'm also interested in like Block Lords, not because
I think I
I
saw
think
that one.
I don't think the game is going to be good, but or I don't think it's going to stand kind of like hold a candle to like other Web2 games, but I think they'll be willing to do a lot of experimentation with like NFT gamification and things like this, and I'm curious to see where they take that. So yeah, those are the kind of a couple games that are on my radar. Let me know if you have any that you think are interesting. So
Yeah, I mean, I like two games right now. EV.io. It might
I heard
not
about that.
be
Yeah,
the best game per se, but it's very easy to introduce people to the ecosystem, and I think they could definitely build on it. It's basically you type in EV.io, you click
it's a
once,
browser-based shooter, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
and you're already in game. You're already shooting people and all that stuff. And then
yeah,
Blankos Block Party just got listed on the Epic Game Store, which is huge. Shout out to them; they're doing a great job. It's kind of
yeah,
like a Fall Guys type game. So
yeah.
yeah, shout out to them. Do you think that maybe being a browser game will kind of like limits the tech for Everseed, or like are you guys going to be HTML5, Unity? How does that really work if you're going to be on a browser?
Yeah, so we're basically a Unity game, and we're exporting to WebGL in order to be performant, in order for us to be access the browser. And uh, I think that if you want to be performant on the browser, you have to understand the limitations of the browser, and you have to play and develop the game that kind of like still will perform well and be optimized even within those constraints. And I think many people who have never tried to ship a game inside the browser before, they're kind of like it's very clear to me, like when you even try their demos, like it's like sluggish. It's like even when you really have like one or two people on the screen, it's like really not well optimized. And if that ends up obviously trying to scale into a multiplayer setting with more people, it's just
Oh yeah,
NGMI.
yeah, and GMI. That's facts. It's not going to make it.
Yeah,
Um, people can sniff out a game that's not well made or well planned out in the first 2 seconds of gameplay. Just when you do things, it's crazy. Now, I want to talk about kind of the long term play for Everseed again. I know we talked about 5 to 10 years down the line. Um, will you guys ever partner with any other games? Like maybe we could see other NFTs in Everseed or vice versa.
yeah, I we So I think that we have some very interesting plans with respect to that.
I see you smiling pretty hard over there, man. It seems like you're holding something from us right now.
Yeah. Um, there, I think that we want to focus on quality over quantity here, and
Of course.
and I think that if you think about quality brands, what percentage of the population are familiar with like Doodles or Azukis or Bored Apes? Very low.
Yep.
But what percentage of the population are familiar with other entertainment IPs or game IPs that have existed in Web 2 and have reached much greater mass adoption? And that's like a order of magnitude or two greater, right? At least. And so um, we nothing public yet, but we are um, hoping to bring on some key partners that will help out with in a big way with potential IP collabs down the line in the future with respect to that strategy.
Awesome. So you guys are going for not really the Web3 guys, but you're trying to and or already partnering with the big Web2, or like you're going for kind of the Web2 gamers outside of our little bubble we're in. That is a very interesting way to take things, and I think that's great for the long term of not only Everseed but just Web3 gaming in general. So that is very very cool. Um, Now we're getting to the kind of back part of the interview here, and I want to ask you: do you have any advice for maybe a future founder or even a game dev, someone that's looking to get into Web3?
Yeah, I it is a lot. I like being realistic. It is a lot harder now to start building a community in Web3 than it was during a bull run. I think the like word that I would use to classify people's kind of feelings right now is like apathy. Like it's just like everything feels very, very low in terms of engagement and things like this. And so um, I think um, if a founder told me like they want to start building on Web3 today, I'd be like, oh man, it's like I'd ask them to seriously kind of like think about that. Like what seemed easy before is like way, way, way more difficult now. Um, that being said, I think if the founder is still uh, you know uh, um, really kind of trying to blaze forward and really believes in Web3, I would say the best advice that I can give them. So the best advice I can give them is find your own path. Like there's no copy pasta formula that works in Web3.
Yeah,
Um, like get that shit out of there. Like web because if you're copy pasting, like you're taking the wrong lessons. There's this one founder who reached out to me and I was talking to him and he's like I really want to know how you built Everseed's community, like because you have a really great community and we want to do something similar. And I said, like, here's what we did, but you can throw all the playbook out the window because we did this during a bull run. And if you tried to do this right now, you would fail. And so I think it really, Web3 advantages people who think on their feet, who improvise, and who can actually like uh, deeply understand things on a first principles basis. And if you're just blindly copying, then you're NGMI. So, yeah,
that is very important. Yeah, guys, things are way different. Expectations are a lot higher. People aren't gonna buy come apes anymore.
yeah,
Like things have definitely changed in Web3, and I think people are starting to realize even more now that we need a Web2 business model with maybe a Web3 product, and especially
yeah,
with these royalties going away, it's like wow, okay, we're changing very fast. So yeah, I appreciate that advice, and I hope that at least it helped one person in the audience who's looking to do something amazing in Web3. Now, Kenny, can you please give me? Oh no, one last question, right? So why is it
yeah.
treeverse? Why'd you guys go with trees, plants, all that? Because I'm Farmer Nash, and I
Oh,
I
you mean
love
Everseed?
all
We're
that.
not Treeverse.
Oh, I'm sorry, Everseed. Sorry.
Although I will say that I am familiar with the Treeverse project, and I think they've done a good job of evolving that over the time of their project. Like in the beginning, it was just like pixelated trees, and now they have some pretty great concept art. So kudos to that team.
Yeah, but I
Um,
want to talk about Everseed though. My bad. My bad.
No worries. So why the theme of Everseed?
Yeah, tell me about that.
Yeah, I think y- so we one of the things that we wanted to do, because we saw that there's a lot of that are hating on NFTs because they're destroying the environment, um, quote unquote, uh,
Yeah.
allegedly, is we wanted to not just be a carbon neutral, but a carbon negative project where, in playing our game, you can actually uh, fight climate change, and I think that's a very positive, narrative to sh- uh, you know, proselytize our kind of like project to Web 2 gamers, and because we'll be the only project in which like you can actually do that, play a game and have a positive environmental impact. So to be consistent with that, we thought the theme would be appropriate there. So
Awesome. Yeah, and that's very powerful too. That's a big concern with a lot of people in Web 2, I would say, probably not Web 3, but Web 2, so that's very important and yeah, we all appreciate that, right? Our environment is very important. So,
yeah.
Kenny, go ahead and, give us a little recap, maybe a call to action. Where can we follow you? Where can we follow Everseed? Tell us about that.
Yeah, I would say the best way to kind of check us out is on Twitter, twitter.com/playeverseed. Um, and there we'll have like links to other aspects of our kind of like web presence. Like you could join our Discord community. If you want to engage in future playtests. Our demo is currently closed, but we open it up periodically as surprises to our holders every so often. And so feel free to pick up our Ranger or Sprout from the Magic Eden Marketplace. And yeah, right now during this interim period, we've basically said you don't have to pay us royalties, and we won't punish you kind of like in any way because everybody's in kind of limbo. But that may change in the future, and I think one of the key things is like join us because you believe in the game and the project and what we stand for, and whether or not and we will always prioritize kind of like rewarding our loyal kind of like community members, and no matter what the kind of shape or nature of the NFT market becomes, we will be here to stay, and we supersede. People play Everseed. People will play and come to Everseed for the game, and and that will persist beyond any type of other technology like NFTs. So
Awesome. Love to hear it. Love to hear the vision. So thank you so much, Kenny, guys. Links to Everseed and his Twitter, everything that you need is in the description. And thank you once again very much for coming. Guys, I'm Farmer Nash. Remember to hit that like, hit that subscribe, and comment. Let me know who you want me to interview next. We do games, projects, founders, anything. So once again, thank you for coming. Remember to like, subscribe, like, subscribe, like, subscribe.